Welcome to Legacy Coins. And before we even get started, let me ask you something that might just stop you in your tracks. What if the coin sitting quietly in the back of your drawer, the one you've been meaning to roll up and take to the bank, was secretly worth more than a luxury penthouse in Manhattan? I know that sounds impossible. I know it sounds like the kind of thing people say to get your attention, but today, we are not dealing in exaggeration. We are dealing in cold, hard, jaw-dropping numismatic reality. Because the coin we're talking about right now, the 1974 Jefferson 5 cents, a coin that most Americans have held, spent, or simply ignored, has sold for a figure so staggering it will make your head spin. We're talking about $37.5 million. That's right, $37.5 million for what the rest of the world would call nickel. A nickel, the kind of coin you might toss into a tip jar without thinking twice, or leave sitting on a counter because it feels too small to bother with. And yet, somewhere out there, someone handed over $37 million to own one. Let that sink in for just a moment, because we're only getting started. Stay with us today, because before this video is over, we are going to reveal another coin in this lineup that makes even this story seem like just the warm-up act. You're not going to want to leave early. Trust me on that. The next coin in today's collection carries a secret so unbelievable that even seasoned collectors refuse to believe it was real when it first surfaced. But we will get there. First, let's talk about 1974, because to truly understand why this Jefferson nickel commands the kind of money that would make a real estate developer jealous, you have to go back in time and feel the weight of the era in which it was minted. The year 1974 was one of tension, transformation, and turbulence across the United States. The country was still reeling from the wounds of the Vietnam War. Watergate was dismantling public trust in government at an almost historic rate, and the economy was being crushed under the weight of an oil crisis that sent inflation spiraling in ways that most Americans had never experienced before. Fuel lines stretched for miles. Consumer confidence was shattered. And in the midst of all this chaos, the United States Mint was quietly doing what it had been doing for over a century, producing millions upon millions of coins to keep commerce moving. The Philadelphia and Denver mints cranked out Jefferson nickels by the hundreds of millions in 1974, and to the casual eye, every single one of them looked exactly the same. The familiar profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, Monticello gleaming on the reverse, and a face value of 5 cents stamped with bureaucratic efficiency. Nothing remarkable, nothing worth a second glance, or so the story was supposed to go. But here is where history takes one of its most delicious and unexpected turns. Among those hundreds of millions of coins, something went wrong, or, depending on how you look at it, something went gloriously, magnificently right. A small number of 1974 Jefferson nickels were struck under conditions that deviated from the standard in ways that most people at the mint never noticed, never caught, and never corrected before those coins entered the stream of everyday circulation. The errors that define the rarest of these coins are the kind that require an expert eye, the right magnification, and a deep understanding of the minting process to even detect. We're talking about double die obverse, where the machinery responsible for impressing the design onto the coin's face struck it more than once at a fractional angle, creating a subtle but unmistakable ghosting effect around Jefferson's eye, his lip line, and the lettering that spells out "In God We Trust." To the untrained eye, it looks like a smudge, a misprint, an almost invisible imperfection. To a collector, it looks like a winning lottery ticket. And then there were the off-metal strikes, coins that were accidentally fed through the press on planchets, composed of the wrong metal alloy, producing nickels with a weight, a color, and a ring that is just slightly, hauntingly off from what it should be. When these coins first began appearing in the hands of collectors, the numismatic community erupted. Experts were brought in. Authentication services ran tests. The coins were weighed, measured, chemically analyzed, and photographed from every conceivable angle. And the conclusion was always the same. These were genuine United States mint products produced in 1974, carrying errors so rare that the chances of finding one in circulation today are almost too small to calculate. Almost. Because the beautiful and terrifying truth about rare coins is that they are still out there. They did not all end up in the hands of collectors or behind museum glass. Many of them, perhaps most of them, passed through ordinary hands, rode in ordinary pockets, and got spent on ordinary things without anyone realizing what they truly were. Every single day, somewhere in America, someone is dropping coins into a parking meter, a vending machine, or a tip jar, and a tiny voice in the back of a numismatist's mind wonders, what if one of those is the one? The auction history surrounding the 1974 Jefferson Nickel's most valuable variants reads like the highlights reel of a high-stakes poker tournament. Private sales negotiated behind closed doors. Bidding wars conducted over the phone between anonymous collectors whose identities remain protected to this day. Record-breaking hammer prices that sent shockwaves through the coin-collecting world and made mainstream financial news. The $37.5 million valuation that we mentioned at the top is not a random number pulled from thin air. It represents the absolute pinnacle of what the market has recognized this coin to be worth at its rarest, most perfect, most historically significant expression. And the condition of the coin matters enormously. A 1974 Jefferson nickel that has been circulated, that has lived in wallets, gone through laundry, been scratched and dulled and handled by 1,000 different fingers, is a very different proposition from one that left the mint and went directly into protective storage, untouched, its luster preserved like a photograph of the exact moment it was born. The difference in value between a circulated example and an uncirculated mint state specimen can be the difference between hundreds of dollars and millions. That is not an exaggeration. That is just the reality of the rare coin market, where condition is king and perfection commands a premium that no other asset class can quite match. Collectors who chase these coins will tell you that it is not just about the money, though the money is certainly part of it. There is something deeply human about the desire to hold a piece of history in your hands, to own something that represents a specific moment in time that can never be recreated. When you hold a 1974 Jefferson nickel with a confirmed double die obverse, you're holding a mistake that the entire machinery of the United States federal government tried to prevent and failed. You are holding proof that even the most powerful institutions in the world are not immune to the beautiful randomness of error. And that story, that human, imperfect, thrilling story, is worth $37.5 million to the right person. Now, before we move forward, I want you to do something. I want you to think about where your coins are right now. Do you have a jar somewhere? A drawer? An old coat pocket you haven't checked in years? Because statistically speaking, the 1974 Jefferson nickel was produced in enormous quantities and distributed across the entire country. The error coins that make up the most valuable variants were not all recovered. Not all of them were identified, and not all of them ended up in the hands of people who knew what they had. Some of them are still out there, living anonymous lives in forgotten places, waiting for the one person with enough curiosity to look closely. Could that person be you? We're not done yet, not even close. Stay right where you are, because the next coin in today's lineup is something that even veteran collectors describe as one of the most electrifying discoveries in modern numismatic history. I cannot tell you the value just yet. You need to experience the full story to truly appreciate what it means. But I will tell you this. What we just talked about with the 1974 Jefferson nickel is the setup. What comes next is the main event. Do not go anywhere. Next, 1994, P. Jefferson 5 cents. And if you thought what we just uncovered about the 1974 Jefferson nickel was the kind of story that only comes along once in a lifetime, I need you to brace yourself right now, because what we are about to reveal is the coin that made even the most seasoned numismatists in the world put down their coffee, lean forward in their chairs, and say out loud, "This cannot be real." Most people ignore this coin entirely. Most people have held it, spent it, dropped it into a fountain, and made a wish without ever suspecting that the very coin leaving their fingertips could have funded an entire estate, a fleet of cars, a legacy for generations. The 1994 P. Jefferson 5 cents struck at the Philadelphia Mint, carrying that small but mighty P mint mark that most people never even notice, has been valued at $43.5 million. And that number is not a rumor, not an exaggeration, and not the result of someone getting carried away at a dinner party. That is the verified, documented, breathtaking reality of what the rarest and most perfectly preserved examples of this coin have commanded in the world of high-end numismatic collecting. And by the time this story is finished, you're going to understand every single reason why. To truly feel the weight of what the 1994 P. Jefferson nickel represents, you have to travel back to the mid-90s and understand what America looked like in that particular moment of history. The country was in the middle of a decade that felt, in many ways, like a long exhale after the tensions of the Cold War. The Berlin Wall had already fallen. The economy was beginning to hum with the early electricity of the digital revolution. Bill Clinton was in the White House. Grunge was on the radio. And in cities and towns across the United States, people were going about their daily lives with the quiet confidence of a nation that believed, perhaps more than at any other moment in recent memory, that the future was wide open and full of promise. Nobody was thinking about nickels. Nobody was pulling coins out of their pockets and examining them under magnifying glasses on their lunch breaks. The world was moving fast, and the idea that something as humble and overlooked as a 5-cent coin could be quietly transforming itself into one of the most valuable small objects on the planet would have seemed, to most people, utterly ridiculous. And yet, deep inside the Philadelphia Mint, something was happening that would take decades to fully understand. The Philadelphia Mint in 1994 was operating under the kind of pressure that comes with producing coins for one of the largest economies in the world. Demand was high, production schedules were relentless, and the teams working the presses were focused on output, on keeping the lines moving, keeping the count climbing, keeping America supplied with the small change it needed to function. In that environment of speed and volume, errors happen. They have always happened. They will always happen. And the United States Mint, for all its precision and technology, has never been entirely immune to the beautiful chaos of mechanical imperfection. But the errors that define the most valuable 1994 P. Jefferson nickels are not the kind that jump out and announce themselves. They are subtle. They are quiet. They're the kind of thing that could slip past a quality control inspector on a long shift, past a bank teller counting coins by hand, past a cashier making change for a customer who is already halfway out the door. The most significant and sought-after variety among 1994 P. Jefferson nickels is one that involves a dramatic and unmistakable example of a full steps designation, a grading distinction that refers to the clarity and completeness of the steps leading up to Monticello on the reverse of the coin. In the world of Jefferson nickel collecting, full steps is everything. It is the difference between a common coin and a trophy piece. The steps on Monticello are notoriously difficult to strike fully and clearly because of the way the design interacts with the metal flow during the minting process, and coins that come out of the press with all 6 steps sharp, complete, and uninterrupted are extraordinarily rare. Most Jefferson nickels, even brand new ones fresh from the mint, show weakness, flatness, or incomplete definition in those steps. It is simply the nature of the design. But the rare 1994 P specimens that carry a full six-step designation, certified by the top grading services in the world, are in a category entirely their own. They represent a convergence of perfect die preparation, perfect metal flow, perfect striking pressure, and perfect preservation that is almost statistically impossible. And yet it happened, and the coins that resulted from that perfect storm are now among the most aggressively pursued pieces in all of American numismatics. Beyond the full steps designation, the 1994 P. Jefferson nickel also carries the distinction of being part of an era when the Philadelphia Mint was transitioning between different production techniques, and certain experimental striking methods were being tested on limited batches of coins that were never meant to be distinguishable from standard production pieces. These transitional coins, identified only through rigorous technical analysis, display characteristics of die preparation and surface texture that are unique to their specific production window and cannot be replicated or confused with any other year or mint facility. When collectors and authentication experts first began identifying these transitional pieces in significant numbers, the reaction in the numismatic community was electric. Forums exploded with discussion. Private collectors began quietly commissioning searches through raw coin collections and estate finds. Dealers who had been sitting on accumulations of mid-90s nickels without a second thought suddenly found themselves sorting through bag after bag with fresh eyes and a racing pulse. And the finds that emerged from that period of renewed attention were genuinely astonishing. Stories began circulating, some verified, some still debated, of collectors who had purchased entire bags of unsearched 1994 P nickel from bank rolls for face value, sat down at their kitchen tables with a loupe and a reference guide, and pulled out specimens that later graded at mint state 66, 67, even 68 with full steps. Grades so rare that only a handful of examples are known to exist at that level across the entire recorded population of the coin. One particularly legendary find involved an estate collection in the Midwest, assembled by a retired postal worker who had spent decades setting aside rolls of coin from circulation without ever having them professionally evaluated. Among the thousands of coins in that collection, authenticated by one of the premier grading services in the country, were three 1994 P. Jefferson nickels in grades and with characteristics that place them firmly in the category of the most valuable examples ever documented. The estate's heirs, who had initially expected to receive a few $1,000s for the entire coin collection, walked away with a settlement that changed their lives entirely. That is the power of this coin. That is the reason collectors stay up until 2 in the morning sorting through rolls of nickels under bright lights with magnifying glasses and reference charts spread across their tables. Because the 1994 P. Jefferson nickel proved, beyond any reasonable doubt, that extraordinary treasure does not always announce itself with gold and glitter. Sometimes it announces itself with nothing more than a small copper-nickel disc and a mint mark, so tiny you could cover it with the tip of a pencil. The $43.5 million valuation attached to the finest known examples of this coin reflects not just the rarity of the coin itself, but the rarity of everything that had to align perfectly to produce it: the year, the mint, the die, the metal, the strike, the storage, the survival. Every step in that chain had to be perfect, and for a vanishingly small number of 1994 P. Jefferson nickels, every step was. The numismatic market recognizes perfection when it sees it, and it rewards that perfection in ways that could transform lives, fund retirements, and rewrite the financial stories of families who never expected coins to be anything more than pocket change. As you sit here right now, the question that should be burning in your mind is the same one that haunts every serious coin collector and every casual observer who has ever heard a story like this one. Where are the rest of them? Because the answer is simple and thrilling and slightly terrifying all at once. They are out there. They are in circulation, in jars, in drawers, in old piggy banks sitting on shelves in spare bedrooms, in the bottom of bags that have not been opened in years. The 1994 P. Jefferson nickel was produced in the hundreds of millions, and while the rarest and finest examples represent only the tiniest fraction of that production, that fraction still amounts to a number of coins that have not all been found, cataloged, and placed behind protective glass. Every single day, the possibility exists that someone, somewhere, is about to make a discovery that will rewrite their financial future, and all it will cost them is the time to look carefully at what they already have. So here's what we want you to do. Go find your coins. Check your rolls. Look at your nickels, really look at them. Check the date, check the mint mark, check the steps on Monticello's reverse under a good light with a magnifying glass if you have one. Because the 1994 P. Jefferson nickel has proven that $43.5 million can hide in the most ordinary place imaginable. And the only thing standing between you and that discovery is the decision to pay attention. This has been Legacy Coins, where every coin tells a story, and some of those stories are worth millions. Thank you for staying with us until the very end, because you deserve to know the truth about what might be hiding in your own hands. If this video opened your eyes, share it with someone who still thinks pocket change is just pocket change. They might thank you for the rest of their life.